have to worry about and think strongly about is November 1st. Because that's the deadline for input into the zero document that goes to Rio. So these are the two issues. We'll come back to that. I will be able to go into a bit more detail on that. So, then we'll start. Now, for your comfort, or for your eyes, the blue is not going to be used very strongly. So, it's just a must for a better century is Rio plus 20, and I think it is. So, if this now works, we'll put it on and see if it works. And it works. Yes, it does work. Okay. Our defining area, look, if you turn it off, it's going to be too dark. So you can see this, right? And I'm reading most of it. And when I jump over a few slides, don't worry because you can get it later. So, should we get involved? Absolutely. I mean, these are some headliners that, because I think it's, as we just heard, it's going to be a new economic system for the world. I think, I hope. It's not going to be negotiated. Secretary General Shah, who is the Secretary General of the conference, has said we don't want to go for a detailed outcome document on green economy. We want to go for guidelines. And guidelines set standards to a much larger degree than we are on our own. The rights of people to get involved in this system. The second, as you will see, theme is governance structure. Get involved, extremely important. And new global standards for sustainable development, I really think so. So the relationship between ideas, knowledge and action is always a complex one, we know that. But if you really think about it, we may be surprised at how much we can do. I'd like to start with a few quotes. I always think that people in positions can formulate themselves quite well, and I like this one. This is from the UN report launched in 2005 called Enlarge Your Freedom, and I think you should put it in your bag and carry it around. It's a very good document, and it has meant a lot for the development, the conceptual development of a lot of things. We fundamentally depend on natural systems and resources for our existence and development. Our efforts to defeat poverty and pursue sustainable development will be in vain if environmental degradation and natural resource depletion continue unabated. Paragraph 57 of that report. And then the same guy who actually initiated Enlarge Your Freedom, Kofi Annan, came up with this when he commented on governance. He said good governance at the local, national and international levels is perhaps the single most important factor in promoting development and advancing the cause of peace. I think there are two great quotes that we could start with. So, we're discussing nothing new. It's been said time and again. It's been said over and over and over. Rachel Carson, as we already know, said it in 1962. Schumacher, another great American environmentalist, said it in the a British environmentalist said it in the 60s. He coined the phrase "small is beautiful," which is actually one of the questions that was asked. What about the small people and the entrepreneurs? Barry Commoner, American environmentalist, said the same things in the 70s. Stockholm's in 92 repeated it. Agenda 21 says it. The Millennium Ecosystems Report says it. Johannesburg said it. We're repeating it over and over and over again. There is, however, a big difference between when Rachel Carson said it and we are saying it. And today, there is a global initiative. There is a global audience. Rachel Carson was a lone voice. Today, people are willing to listen. And this is a huge difference. And yes, I was in Stockholm. I was the youngest person running around there. We were fighting for the survival of the world. And one of the things we managed that aggrieved my country, and perhaps even Japan, we managed to stop the hunting of the blue whale. That was one of the things that came out of the Stockholm Conference. And another thing that came out, which may not really be reflected in the report, the Stockholm Conference is the first conference to name an Agent Orange. And Olof Palme, the Prime Minister of Sweden, picked it up in his introductory speech, which almost led to the Americans leaving the room. And this is when we understood that the Vietnam War was also about the environment. So decisions are made, and we can use them to our advantage if we engage. And engaging in the UN system is engaging in process. You may disagree with this, and say, as two people, I was just doing the same thing in Santiago for the regional meeting there. There were two people who adamantly came up and said, this is a waste of time, it's a waste of resources, blah, blah, blah. They were continuing saying this for 4 days, and I went up to them and I said, if this is a waste of time, why have you been here for 3 days? I mean, if you think this is a waste of time, if you think it's a wrong process, opt out. Because you are going to be so frustrated. If you think it makes sense and you engage, it's going to be stimulating, challenging, and a lot of fun. You have to live with the frustrations as well. You have to do that. What is missing in decisions? Well, we have facts and we need action, right? We have the resources and money. We're willing to act, but what is it we are willing to do? And what are the consequences of our actions? These are some of the questions I think we need to raise. And by and large, it's a question of political will and doing the right thing for all people. It's the willed actions that we're talking about. Conceptual theories leads to willed actions, I'm pretty sure. But the choices we're about to make will take us forward in one way or another. And I think that when you talk to politicians, they have something which is called NIMT syndromes. And the NIMT syndrome for our politicians is actually translated into not in my term. So you need to get them out of the not in my term system and think about the next 30 years. If you look at what's been written about the Rio Plus 20 process so far, it's reactive. You know, they look back instead of saying, what do we want in 2030? So this is one of the challenges. And then I ask you, are you guys solution-oriented? Are you welfare-oriented? This is important to ask in my own area. Are people really interested in change or just charity? And are we altruistic and sharing and optimistic? I assume you're optimistic. If you're not optimistic, you wouldn't be spending a summer here. I know that for sure. So the UN decided on the 24th of December, in 2009 to host this conference. This is the resolution, and you need to read it. I'll go back and look at some of the paragraphs later because they're important. So don't take this down. I mean, you'll get it later. The reference is there. So the Rio themes now and in Rio for the UN and for us are, it says one objective with 3 elements and 2 themes. That's the official thing by the Bureau. The Bureau says this is what it is. So what is it? The objective with 3 elements is to secure renewed political commitment for sustainable development. That's going to be the big statement. And this statement, even though they're big and we think they're cliche-filled, means something. If you look at some of the statements that are being made in earlier conferences, they're fairly normative. So, you know, NGOs, civil society, and especially the youthful part of civil society, tend to adopt a certain cynicism towards these fantastic words. But they really mean something if you put them in context. So don't forget the chapeaus. The second one is assessing the progress to date and the remaining gaps in the implementation of the outcomes of the major sustainable development conferences. This is the second. The third is addressing new and emerging challenges. It's a tricky thing because we would like to control the future, so we would like to define emerging challenges, and how can we do that? What's going to be the emerging challenge in 2025? But you need to have a mechanism for that, and I'll come back to that later. Now, the themes of the conference will include a green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication, and the institutional framework for sustainable development. So, you want to impact on the process. You want to impact on the themes. I've gone through, I don't know how many training sessions with non-governmental organizations, and a lot of them in Europe says, well, we're going to turn Rio into a climate conference. I say, why are you coming? This is not about climate. If you want to address climate, then be strategic and think, where does climate end up? It's under green economy and energy, sustainable energy. If you're not strategic about your thinking and link it to the themes, your input is not going to be considered. This is not a conference that is run by NGOs, it's run by governments. And if we're part of it, we accept the rules of the game and then we engage strongly with it. And it's possible because it's so dramatically different. Something has happened. The major groups in civil society have been given a role in the process by being referred to in 8 of the 29 paragraphs. This is unique. In 1972, when we ran around in Stockholm, NGOs came out of nowhere, especially lots of veterans from the Vietnam War, and they had a strong message. They were not part and parcel of the process. UNEP adopted a policy to deal with non-governmental organizations after the Stockholm Conference. And because of the foresight of Olof Palme, the Prime Minister, Maurice Strong, who ended up as the Secretary General of UNEP, of the Director, and a few other people, NGOs were part of the process, but outside. In 1992, in Rio, the concept of the 9 major groups, which we need to understand, was coined. It was in the report, and at the very end, civil society was almost invited to the negotiating table. A huge process forward. In 2002 in Johannesburg, we were asked officially to run the civil society process parallel to the negotiations, but we were allowed into every room. There was no obstacle. Now we are part of the resolution. And this is unique. The 2009 decision is a historical decision because we're part of the, I would like to say, the summit. And we're referred to it in 8 of the 9 paragraphs. We'll come back to that a little bit later also. So the concept was coined, and as I said, in chapter 23 in Agenda 24, and it identifies the 9 major groups. It's a mechanism through which civil society and business interact with the UN system, and it is the mechanism that will be used during the Rio process. Now, you will have to fit into one of the 9 major groups. When we talked about this in Latin America, it was difficult because they were not used to it, and there was a lot of resistance. I said, you can resist as much as you want to, but this is the rules of the game. You want to change it? Have a strategy for change in Rio. And it is possible to improve, amend, etc. But and then we said, well, we need to be in the room. And say, you are in the room. Well, we need to fight for access. You have access. Fight for the substance. And that's a tough challenge. How well do you know the themes? How well do you know the themes to change what the governments are saying? Give them proper challenge. So, the 9 major groups are women, children and youth, indigenous peoples, farmers, non-governmental organizations, trade unions, local authorities, science and technology, business and industry. These are the 9. And of course, some of them are NGOs and others are not. So, what's business got to do with civil society? Now, the interesting thing was, and this again, formalities of the organization. The United Nations Charter, which is the constitution, recognizes 3 players. 3 players, they're governments, they're representatives of intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations. These are the 3 players of the UN. The NGO mandate is found in paragraph 71. Business and industry, science and technology, and local authorities, they're authorities. How can they be part of the major groups? Now, we want them in because municipalities have the ability to act immediately. They don't have to wait for the parliament to decide and debate. They can go like that into environmental issues. So, for them to interact, you had to develop a mechanism, and the mechanism was an international organization running the municipalities, which is called ICLE, or the UCLG, which is the city's organization. So municipalities can become members of ICLE, and then through to the charter, paragraph 71, through ICLE, which is a recognized NGO, they become part of the process. Business cannot go, Samsung or General Motors or whatever cannot be part of the UN, but they can be part of the WBCSG, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, or ICC. And through these organizations, they can then participate as a member. They still adhere to the NGO of the charter. Science and technology the same way. ICSU is an international organization recognized as an NGO. So this is how the UN actually came around the difficulties of formal procedure. And it's working okay. We can challenge each other in this way. The question becomes problematic when intergovernmental processes, that is the UN, says you have to have one consolidated statement. And we have consistently at the CSD said, no, it's 9 or none. And we say, and we beg you, understand that if the UN can recognize 193 countries and deal with that plurality, I'm sure they can deal with 9 major groups. And they've accepted that. So, the functionality of the 9 major groups is quite interesting, because you have modalities with speaking procedure, such as entry points, interplenaries, right of representation, opening and concluding statements, right of contributing to thematic discussions, etc. All this was developed through the Commission on Sustainable Development. And there is now a system that will be used also here. I mean, you will be given entry points for the RIM, and the entry points are sort of official statements based on your own major groups. This is something that you'll have to figure out who's going to speak when and what you're going to say. That's up to you guys. But the process it's not set in stone, but the process modalities was developed by CSD in 2003. So, the major groups have 2 overarching functions, a service function and a representative function. The service function is carried out by the organizing partner. I'm an organizing partner. My role as an organizing partner for the NGO community is to be of service, to tell you about the process, talk to people who deal with logistics, etc. My role is not a political role. The political role is decided by the constituency which is present and at the negotiation process. And that means that the representative body of the major groups are the present people in the conference. Now, this seems unfair to all the people who cannot come. So that's why there is a process around this by developing policy. And thank God for internet, because now you can actually have a semblance of interactive development of these policy statements. Now, there's added another element to that policy process by the invitation of the Bureau for everyone to contribute to the outcome document. We'll come back to that in a little while. Each of the major groups have their organizing partners. It's appointed by the Bureau. It's not an elected position. You bid for the position and you say, my organization will contribute to this for the next year, we'll spend money behind it. And if you have that money and that interest, you may be selected. And it's important to differentiate between the service function and the policy function. The policy function belongs to the people, not to the organizing partners. And that's a big difference. So, as I said, it's not a political one, but the organizing partners and Wilson and Ned are 2 outstanding examples of this, will chair the meetings and help guide the process through to a successful end. The policy is decided by interactive discussions in the constituency. Always make that difference. So, the representative function, where policy is presented, as I say, to the intergovernmental system, is carried out and decided by each of the present major groups constituency at any given UN meeting. So there is a process, a democracy at work, to the extent that it's possible. It's difficult to do this on a global level. It's difficult to be interactive and inclusive in all elements, and there's always going to be an organization or a person that feels that he or she came too late into the process. And again, I say this is a problem with NGOs because we have a problem with respecting deadlines. And I know what I'm talking about, having been all my life in that part. So, each of the 9 major groups will have their own policy meetings. This is, I think it's important. We've seen huge differences in analysis and approach and values between NGOs, indigenous peoples, usually on one side, and business on the other side. And I think it's unfair that we should find a sort of common denominator, because when we have tried to be one, our statements, civil society statements, has been worse than the government's. So we shouldn't go for that. We should go for strong critical approaches. So, now what? Does the UN concern us? Talk to the NGO, said, UN is a cock, it's a lot of talk, a lot of words, and that's right. That's what the UN is. A lot of talk and a lot of words. But that's the normative part of it. So, what has the UN done for us, and how does the work of this work, how does the work it is carrying out relate to what we do? Does the UN offer us an obvious connection, a necessary connection, a useful connection? How do we understand the UN, or does it not concern us at all? One of the major functions of the UN is global standard setting and development, meaning norms, rules, procedures, and conventions that govern the global community. This is the most important and interesting contribution of this international organization since it was founded in 1941, basically, saw the life in 1945 in San Francisco. And it's very often forgotten. Just think of it. I mean, you've got 193 countries now agreeing to a procedural development, talking the same language in many cases. You've got 702 environmental conventions that are functioning quite well. These are the result of international cooperation. It's quite astounding what we've been able to accomplish over a short period of time. Because, I mean, 60 years is not a long time. It's a very useful time. So, one of the major dilemmas of the UN is the obvious need to implement standards and to create the political will globally to support and abide by these standards. This is the implementation part. This is where you go to UNDP or UNEP or any of the specialized agencies and say, what are you doing with this? How are you implementing these things? Well, this is, of course, when the dilemma comes, because this is when the government says, I know we signed up to it, but we don't want to do it anymore. This is what we need to push. However, the impression is often that many tend to consider UN agreements as obstacles. Listen to the governments, I'm not saying any specific government, tools that hinder the free will and spirit of creative forces and jeopardize national sovereignty. This is often stated in so many words by governments, yet most people consider these treaties as tools that help protect and safeguard something that needs to be protected. This is civil society at its best. And if you look at the development of civil society, it's impressive. There were about 60 organizations present and about 9 or 10 active in San Francisco in 1946. The development of civil society was very slow. There were very few organizations willing to engage in the system. Up until 1992, there were about 2,000 registered non-governmental organizations. Then it exploded. It went from 2,000 to about 60,000 registered NGOs within the UN system in 8 years. And now we might say, where is the world? So what about sustainable development? Does it concern us? This is not an easy thing. I heard, how we reacted to the green economy discussions we just had. Very interesting. So this, you don't have to really think about this, but I like it. And it is a challenging thought. Concepts often remain concepts in search of applications. And I think one of the applications is exactly trying to define sustainable development. 1987, the Brundtland Commission gave sustainable development 3 pillars to stand on. And this is social, economic, and environmental pillar. And we just heard that we need to have the economic and environmental pillar going in the green economy, but he also said we need to lean on the social pillar. Integrating this is difficult. Very difficult. So, does it have a wider application? I saw this in a book that environmental sustainability is largely a concept of community or common purpose. Get the people involved here. This is the social pillar speaking, directly the economic pillar. To build a consensus in support of sustainability is a necessarily democratic and participatory exercise for at least 2 reasons. 1, a breaking down of the polarized and polarizing language that reflect entrenched ideologies. And 2, environmental values and democracy are bound together at the level of principle. And 3, the challenge of global sustainability demonstrates that the crisis of ecology and democratic legitimacy are inextricably linked. And I think, if this is a lot of words, you can look at the slides afterwards, but I think I'm trying to capture the challenge that we will face and do something with at Rio+20. And yes, I do believe that governments have a very strong role, but anything will show you that if you haven't empowered people and people are with it, it's not going to last. What is in the resolution? An application for sustainability? Let's go back to the Rio+20 for a little while. Now, what's in the UN resolution? Well, themes are defined, content is not. That was an early criticism about the resolution, but I think it's a positive thing, because it says we're going to talk about institutional democracy, institutional governance. We are going to talk about green economy, and we need actually you guys out there to help us define this, develop it, put meat on the bone. The conference at the highest political level, that's what the resolution said. Now a lot of countries are working towards a summit, and I think we should push our state leaders to come. I think we need a summit. I think we need somebody with, you know, the blessing of the government to come there. And lots of state leaders are already saying that yes, we would like to come. The NGOs in UK about 3 weeks ago sent was lots of them that signed on, like we're talking about what, 600 or 700 NGOs, asking Prime Minister Cameron to go and be part of the process. And we know that he wants to go, but there's a conservative part of the Conservative Party. I guess that's possible. They don't want him to engage. So there's a bit of a strife going on there. Operationalize the 3 elements of sustainable development is central to the UN tracker. When you read the resolution, this is repeated. So this is important. The resolution emphasizes the importance of CSD, and that's important because it's the CSD that gives the procedural engagement possibilities. That's why CSD is mentioned. It emphasizes the importance of corporate social responsibility. It's interesting that the resolution says we want something on this, and it emphasizes the importance on sustainable consumption and production. Now, last CSD, the SCP issue fell out because of a lot of politicking. Shah recently said in Beijing, the SCP issue is a way back into the green economy, so they want to put it back on the agenda. So, what else? It says that civil society, as I said, shall participate in all meetings at all levels of the preparatory process, including the conference. We have a resolution from the highest body of the UN to back us up. We don't have to ask for permission to be there. But with that comes obligations. So, what else? Any visible problems? I think the process lacks dynamics. This is no longer true. It changed over the last 2 weeks. It's picking up, and it's fantastic. Just seeing that there are so many NGOs or civil society people coming here, overflowing in Africa, same in Cairo. 135 people came to the preparatory meeting in Santiago. It's never happened before. The dynamics is picking up also on governments. My government dragged its feet. We pushed. It was like pushing into something that, you know, there was no substance there. We put our hand in and we got it back, and there was no dent made in the government. Suddenly it changed 3 weeks ago. Developed countries are still using their brakes, but they're letting up finally. They're finally realizing, hey guys, this is going to be big. Maybe we should get along. Maybe we should see what this is all about. And developed countries tend still to upgrade other processes, and I don't like that. The Davos thing, the G8, the whatever, the Gs, that they sort of have a gold card to go into their own negotiating, excluding us. It's not good. We have to fight for the multilateralism. The process working in the shadow of a number of fiasco conferences. I keep hearing that from European governments, and they keep coming back to Copenhagen as the big thing that failed. And I'm thinking, was it really a failure? And okay, fine. If that was one, then let's make this one a success. And they say, yeah, we need to make it a success. We need to make it a big thing, positive. The process seems to lack vision. Yes, I still think it lacks vision. And maybe this is a challenge that we need to pick up. Few countries have developed basic positions still. It's changing right now. The EU just came around with their document. My country has not finalized their thing yet, but it's coming there, Norway is. So things are changing and happening. They have to be fast because the 1st of November is the deadline for the input into the outcome document. And there are unclear roles, if you read the resolution between the various units of the UN. And lack of resources from donors, still a problem, still a big problem. And I think we need to kick some shins to get that improved. There's no definition or direction for the discussion concerning the green economy concept. The resolution doesn't contain that, but new papers are coming in all the time. And we have to visit the UNEP website and the UNDESA website to see all this provocative thoughts. The resolution doesn't indicate in any way how to strengthen institutional architecture. It just says we need to strengthen it. Okay, but that's an opportunity. Doesn't deal with or reflect the changing political realities in the world today, and I think that's maybe the biggest weakness. It doesn't even allow for a discussion on that, except for the chapeau, the introduction. And it doesn't deal with UNEP at all, which I think is a big weakness. What's positive and new? G77 has been pushing the process for a long time, and I hope they're not giving up now. even though there is a bit of a divergent opinions of the green economy. Civil society, we're there, as I've said a couple of times. I used to say the US is a democratic party. That's great. I'm not thinking that is so great anymore. But at least their bureaucrats are run by democratic ideology. So until they change government comes, I think we can work with them. The themes are looking for content and proposals are actively sought and are positively welcoming. Yes, this is very different from 2002 and 1992. Do we have an outdated worldview? I'm going to do that before I'm going to take a break. I'm asking you guys, do we have an outdated worldview? Let me just challenge you a little bit. Are the developing nations the same today as they were in the 1970s? Of course not. I mean, why do you bring it up? That's silly. Political blocs are changing. Old ones are fragmenting. Do we realize that? Do we internalize it? Do we deal with it? Or do we say, no, the institutions are the same? Has anything really happened over the last 20 to 30 years in politics, global politics? Some of the discussions, at least in my part of the world, frightens me, because I would say that non-governmental organizations in Europe walk around in the world with a view which is safely founded in the 1970s. Now that may be the case, but my God, that's old, because we're looking at 2030. So it's not only 40 years old, it's 70 years old. So the world is changing from a bipolar world, which was the case in the 70s, to a multipolar world today. There was a north-south divide in the 70s, definitely. And I would go as far as saying that poverty, which is the scourge of humanity, was actually non-existent in Europe to a large extent. It was the problem of the South. It's no longer true. I just saw the statistics from the US released in July. 22% of the American population live on or below the poverty-related line in the richest country in the world, with 12 million people starving, according to WHO FAO standards, in the US. 11% of the population in Europe, in the EU, live on or below poverty-related line. Poverty is everywhere today, and we need to address that. Population increase. Look at this fantastic development. And the demography is now coming up in all sorts of weird ways. Now we need to deal with it, but deal with it in a proper perspective. Population increased 2.3% per annum in the 70s. Now it's down to 1.1%. The projections, I was also one of the youngest delegates in 1974 at the first population conference. The projection then was given by the UN. By the end of this century, they said it will be close to 25 billion people. That's nonsense. I mean, it didn't hold true, but you know, everybody believed it. Today, they're saying 9 billion or below. So we've seen this. You know this. I just put it in there as an illustration. Fertility rates are falling everywhere. and if any body of the UN should be accredited with some success stories, this is it. It's not always peaceful and it's not always good, but they are falling. And they're consistent where there's a free choice behind it. So this is what I said. I mean, the estimates were from 20 billion down to below 9, and maybe even lower. What about the food then? The food issue, that the big food producers say we need to increase the food, we need to increase fertilizer production, etc., etc. Well, look at it. The total food production in 2009 and 10 was 8.6 billion metric tons. The global population is about 6.7 billion people. Now, if you do the math, then you get a food per capita is 1,286 kilo per year. And if you divide that equally among everybody today, you get 3.5 kilo per day. And believe me, if you all ate 3.5 kilo per day, you would change your shape. And now, at 10 billion people, if you say we increase to that, and the food production is constant, this is actually what comes out. 2.5 kilo of food per person a day, or 800 grams per meal, which is more than enough. The UN says in an interesting study published by WHO and FAO saying that if we had this food available and could distribute it equally, we could feed a population with today's production with good nourishment, we could feed 12 billion people with today's production. Now, the problem is that a lot of these food production is fossil fuel based. But the production, the food which is really sold internationally constitutes only 15% of all the food which is being produced. So the small farmers and the small farm produce is not counted in this. So we should resist that intense demand for increasing the pesticide production to have more food. You know, we need to do that. My point here is that we're doing good in some cases, so we don't need these pictures when he grabs the corn out of it. But it's a reminder. So the bipolar world is on the wane, and I would say the classic period of aid is coming to an end as well. If you look and listen to what the donor countries are discussing today, they're trying to see where do we need to go with our international cooperation. And I would say that if the classic period of aid is coming to an end, so does UNDP. They don't like to hear that. Is our understanding of the world today, its problems and solutions, in reality based on how we saw the world as it was back in 1970? And we thought all that we did then actually worked? Is that what we think? Or do we have, is the UN given less priority? Is Davos more important than Geneva, New York, and Nairobi? Is the financial crisis used as an excuse for not giving priority to sustainable development? Yes. Why do we accept that? I think Rio + 20 can change that dramatically. We have the opportunity, more so now than anywhere else. So the same governments that criticize the UN undermines it by withdrawing or reducing their support politically and economically. It was not the case when the bank crisis emerged. They had quite a lot of money in 3 months. They raised more money than the world thought existed. So, what this says is that we need something new, and we need to be forward-looking. And the anti-governmental system in general, and even in particular, offer unprecedented opportunities for people to participate actively in these processes and influence their own fate at home. There is an opportunity out there which is unused and underused. And believe me, it's so easy to get access. When you go to the UN, these conferences, CSD for instance, in one and the same day you have 140 ministers of environment just walking around drinking coffee wondering what the hell they're doing. And when you say, sir or madam, could we talk about this? They say, yeah. And we can interact with them. It's incredible. It's going not to be different in Rio. So I'd just like to end this session by saying this as I work with our confused optimist who said that I love humanity. It's people I can't stand. And I think this sometimes applies to my flock, the NGOs. So in this session 1, we have a 5-minute break, and then we go into more